Oh, welcome back, you beautiful catastrophe. You living proof that some people were never meant to be controlled. Yeah, you. The one they couldn't figure out, couldn't contain, couldn't break no matter how hard they tried. Let me tell you what happened while you were busy becoming unstoppable, while you were out there minding your own business, building your life in silence. They were in the shadows, forming something. They got together, didn't they? Oh yes, they did. The ex-friends, the fake family, the jealous co-workers, the bitter exes, the people who smiled in your face while sharpening knives behind their backs. They formed an alliance, a whole organized coalition dedicated to one singular mission, your destruction. Sounds dramatic? It should. Because that's exactly what it was. They had meetings, actual conversations about you. They compared notes like investigators on a cold case. They shared screenshots, analyzed your posts, dissected your words, tracked your movements. Did you see what they posted? I heard they're doing well now. We need to do something about this. They couldn't stand watching you rise, couldn't stomach seeing you heal, couldn't accept that you were thriving without them. So they did what weak people always do when faced with someone they can't control. They organized. They strategized. They plotted. They coordinated attacks. Some spread rumors, others blocked opportunities. A few played the long game with fake reconciliation attempts meant to gather intel. It was psychological warfare, corporate espionage, emotional terrorism, all wrapped in casual conversation and concerned messages. But here's the thing they didn't account for. Here's the variable that shattered their entire operation. You were never the person they thought you were. They based their entire strategy on the old version of you, the one who cared what they thought, the one who needed their approval, the one who would break under pressure. They prepared for a battle against someone who no longer existed. While they were busy forming committees and drafting plans, you were in your own world, evolving, transforming, becoming something they had no framework to understand. They thought they were hunting prey, but what they didn't realize was that the prey had already metamorphosed into something that didn't even register on their radar anymore. See, they expected you to react, to defend yourself, to engage in their childish game. They set traps, expecting you to fall in. They spread lies, expecting you to frantically correct the record. They created chaos, expecting you to drown in it. But you did something that absolutely destroyed their plans. You didn't react. You didn't defend, you didn't explain, you didn't engage. You just kept walking, kept building, kept rising. And that silence, that refusal to play their game, that unbothered energy, that was the beginning of their downfall. Because an alliance built on destroying someone only works if that someone is destroyable. And you weren't. They spent weeks, maybe months, coordinating this elaborate takedown, investing emotional energy into something that required your participation to succeed. They needed you to be the villain in their story, needed you to confirm their narrative, needed you to give them the satisfaction of seeing you crumble. But you robbed them of that ending. You walked past their traps like they were invisible. You heard the rumors and shrugged. You felt the sabotage and adapted. You saw the fake love and smiled politely before walking away. Every move they made you countered without even trying. Not because you were playing chess while they played checkers, but because you weren't playing at all. Now let's talk about what happens when an alliance built on hatred tries to function without a target that responds. It crumbles, it fractures, it implodes. Because here's the secret about groups formed around negativity. They need constant fuel. They need fresh grievances, new evidence, ongoing drama. They need you to keep feeding their narrative. But when you stopped giving them material, when your life became boring to their surveillance, when there was nothing left to criticize because you were just out here living cleanly, quietly, powerfully, they had nothing left to bond over. The alliance that seemed so solid, so unified in their mission, started showing cracks. First came the awkward silences in their group chats. Someone would post, "Did you see?" and there'd be nothing to see. Someone would say, "We should," and there'd be nothing to do. The thing about hate clubs is they're exhausting to maintain, especially when the target refuses to provide new ammunition. So slowly, quietly, the conversations got shorter. The meetings got less frequent. The energy started to fade. Because plotting someone's downfall is only thrilling when there's a downfall to witness. But you were ascending, not falling. You were building, not breaking. And that created a cognitive dissonance in their minds that they couldn't resolve. Then came the guilt. Oh yes, the guilt. Because some of them, the ones with a shred of conscience left, started questioning the mission. They'd see you posting something positive, see you accomplishing something real, see you genuinely happy, and they'd feel that uncomfortable twist in their chest. Are we the bad guys here? The thought would creep in during quiet moments. What are we even doing? But they couldn't voice it, not yet, because to question the alliance was to admit they'd wasted time, energy, and integrity on something petty and pointless. So they stayed silent, but the doubt was planted. Meanwhile, the core members, the true believers, they started getting desperate. They doubled down, tried harder, reached further, made their attacks more obvious, more aggressive, more unhinged. And that's when the mask started slipping. Other people, neutral observers, started noticing. Why are they so obsessed with this person? This seems excessive. They're trying really hard to make someone look bad. And suddenly the alliance members weren't heroes in their own story anymore. They were starting to look like villains. The narrative was flipping, and they could feel it. Then came the comparisons, the deadly comparisons. Alliance members started looking at their own lives, really looking, and measuring them against yours, and what they saw shook them. While they'd been spending months focused on bringing you down, what had they built? What had they accomplished? What did they have to show for all that energy? And there you were, thriving. There you were, growing. There you were, unbothered and ascending. The comparison wasn't just unfavorable, it was humiliating. They'd organized an entire operation against you, and somehow, impossibly, you'd won without even knowing you were in a fight. The jealousy that had initially united them now started tearing them apart, because jealousy turns inward when it can't touch its target. They started comparing themselves to each other. At least, I didn't go as far as you did. I only participated a little. I was never that invested. The alliance that had seemed so solid was now full of people trying to distance themselves from what they'd done, trying to rewrite their level of involvement, trying to claim they were never really that serious about it. The unity was shattering, the mission was crumbling, and you were still just out there living, completely unaware of the civil war happening in the camp of your enemies. And then it happened, the moment they tried so hard to prevent but couldn't escape. The alliance disbanded, not with a dramatic announcement, not with a formal meeting, but the way these things always end, quietly, awkwardly, with people just stopping to show up. Group chats went silent. Coordination stopped. the unified front crumbled into individuals who could barely look each other in the eye anymore because they'd invested so much into something that not only failed, but made them look pathetic in the process. They'd formed a whole coalition to take down one person, and that one person didn't even notice they were under attack. Some of them tried to save face. I was never really part of that. I always thought it was too much. I just went along to keep the peace. The revisionist history started immediately, everyone trying to rewrite their role, minimize their involvement, distance themselves from the collective shame. But the internet remembers, screenshots exist, and the people who witnessed their obsession weren't fooled. They'd seen the energy, felt the intensity, watched the coordination. There was no pretending it didn't happen, no erasing the evidence of their organized hatred. Others went completely silent, disappeared from social media, changed their patterns, hoping that if they stayed quiet long enough, people would forget their role in the failed takedown. These were the ones consumed by shame, the ones who lay awake at night replaying their actions, wondering how they got so caught up in something so toxic, so pointless, so ultimately humiliating. They couldn't face you, couldn't face themselves, couldn't face the fact that they'd revealed the worst parts of themselves for absolutely nothing. Then there were the brave ones, or maybe the ones with just enough conscience left to feel the weight of what they'd done. They reached out, not all at once, but slowly, tentatively. Hey, can we talk? I need to apologize. I was wrong about you. Some apologies were genuine, born from real remorse. Others were strategic, trying to get back in your good graces now that you were clearly winning. Everything went bad, but here's what's beautiful. By the time they were ready to apologize, you'd already moved so far beyond caring about their validation that their words landed in empty space. The really tragic ones, they're still out there, still bitter, still convinced they were right even though all evidence points to their failure. They can't apologize because that would mean admitting they wasted months of their life on a vendetta that accomplished nothing. They can't move on because their entire identity became wrapped up in opposing you. They're stuck, frozen in a moment of hatred while you're out here living multiple chapters ahead. They formed an alliance to stop your progress. Instead, they stopped their own. The irony is so thick you could cut it with a knife. And the absolute wildest part? You probably don't even know half their names. While they were dedicating group chats to discussing you, you were building something real. While they were analyzing your every move, you barely registered their existence. While they were forming strategies to bring you down, you were ascending to levels they couldn't reach even if they tried. They made you the center of their universe while you had them filed under irrelevant background noise. That power dynamic, that's what really destroyed them. So where does that leave everyone now? Let's paint the picture. The alliance is disbanded, scattered like ashes in the wind. Former allies avoid each other at social gatherings. Group chats that once buzzed with activity are now digital graveyards. The people who coordinated attacks on you can't even coordinate their own lives anymore. They're dealing with the psychological aftermath of realizing they were the villains in a story where they cast themselves as heroes. That's a mind-bending reality to process, and most of them aren't processing it well. Meanwhile, you're out here thriving in ways they can't even comprehend anymore. You're not thriving to spite them, you're not succeeding to prove them wrong. You're literally just living your authentic life, and it happens to be spectacular. That's what kills them the most. The fact that their existence barely registers in your world now. They spent so much energy trying to live rent-free in your head, but you evicted them without notice, changed the locks, and forgot they ever had the address. You're the landlord of your own mind, and they're just former tenants who got kicked out for non-payment of respect. The lesson here, the brutal, beautiful lesson is this. Alliances built on tearing someone down will always collapse under the weight of their own negativity. You can't build anything lasting on a foundation of hatred. You can't create meaningful bonds through shared cruelty. You can't sustain energy around destruction without destroying yourself in the process. They learned this the hard way, and honestly, they deserved to. Because while they were plotting your downfall, you were plotting your rise. While they were coordinating attacks, you were coordinating your life. While they were wasting time, you were investing it. And here's what they'll never tell you, but you need to know. Some of them still watch you. Not with hatred anymore, but with something worse, regret, mixed with awe. They see what you've become, what you've built, where you've gone, and they realize they could have been part of your story in a positive way. They could have supported you, learned from you, grown alongside you. Instead, they chose opposition, and now they're stuck watching from the outside as you lived the life they told themselves you didn't deserve. That's a special kind of torture, one they inflicted on themselves. There's also a subset who've genuinely changed, who saw the error in their ways and used it as a catalyst for growth. They looked at their behavior, felt the shame, and decided to become better people. They don't expect your forgiveness, don't even ask for it. They just quietly work on themselves and occasionally think about how differently things could have gone. These people learned the hardest way possible, that hatred is a poison you drink hoping someone else dies. They survive the poisoning, but barely, and they carry the scars. But let's be clear about something, because this is important. You don't owe any of them anything. Not forgiveness, not a second chance, not even acknowledgement. They made their choices, formed their alliance, executed their plans, and failed spectacularly. That's on them. You don't have to carry their guilt, their shame, their regret. You don't have to make them feel better about what they did. You don't have to be the bigger person and offer reconciliation. You've already won by simply continuing to exist authentically. Anything beyond that is charity they didn't earn. Now let's talk about where you're sitting right now, metaphorically speaking. You're on a throne, but not one you stole or seized. It's a throne you built brick by brick while they were trying to knock down your foundation. It's constructed from discipline they called obsession, from confidence they called arrogance, from boundaries they called coldness, from self-love they called narcissism. Every insult they threw became a building block. Every obstacle they created became a step upward. They tried to bury you, but what they didn't know was that you were a seed. Look around at your kingdom now. Look at what you've built while they were busy scheming. Look at the peace you've cultivated, the growth you've achieved, the authentic connections you've made with people who actually matter. Look at the skills you've developed, the goals you've reached, the person you've become. All of that happened during the same time period. They were wasting energy trying to stop you. They were focused on destruction while you were focused on creation. The contrast isn't just visible, it's blinding. And here's something they'll never understand. You didn't win because you fought back. You won because you fought forward. You didn't waste time defending yourself from their attacks. You didn't slow down to address their lies. You didn't stop building to engage in their drama. You just kept moving, kept creating, kept ascending. And that forward motion, that unstoppable momentum, that was the ultimate defense. They were throwing stones at a target that was already miles ahead. And by the time their stones landed, you were in a completely different dimension. The throne you sit on now, it's not about power over others. It's about power over yourself. It's sovereignty. It's self-governance. It's the ability to wake up every day and choose your path, regardless of who approves or disapproves. That's real royalty, not the performative kind they were chasing with their alliance. They wanted to feel powerful by making you feel weak. You became powerful by making yourself strong. They needed your downfall to feel elevated. You elevated yourself without needing anyone's downfall. That's the difference between kings and pretenders. Underneath your throne, ashes. The ashes of their failed plans, their disbanded alliance, their wasted energy, their lost time. You didn't put them there aggressively. They just naturally settled there when their schemes combusted from their own toxicity. Those ashes serve as a reminder, not of your cruelty, but of your resilience. They're evidence that some people can't be stopped by committees, can't be destroyed by coordination, can't be diminished by collective effort. They're proof that one person living authentically is more powerful than 100 people living falsely. And the most beautiful part? You're not sitting on that throne thinking about them. You're not obsessing over their downfall the way they obsessed over yours. You're looking ahead, planning next moves, building bigger dreams, reaching for higher goals. They're a footnote in your history, barely worth a paragraph, while they're still writing whole chapters about you in their minds. That asymmetry in attention, that imbalance in mental real estate, that's the clearest evidence of who won. Victors move forward, losers stay stuck. You're in motion, they're in stagnation. Here's what nobody talks about when discussing situations like this: the quiet victory. Not the loud, obvious, in-your-face kind of winning, but the silent, personal, profound victory of simply being okay, of waking up without the weight of their drama, of living without the noise of their nonsense, of existing in peace while they exist in turmoil. That's not just winning, that's transcending the entire game they tried to trap you in. They wanted to see you broken, scattered, desperate, defeated. They fantasized about you crumbling under the pressure of their organized assault. They imagined you crying, struggling, reaching out for help, showing weakness. That fantasy sustained them through their alliance meetings. It gave them purpose, direction, unity. But you robbed them of that satisfaction by doing something radical. You were fine. You were better than fine. You were flourishing. And every day you woke up whole. You shattered their fantasy a little more. There's a special kind of victory in being underestimated, so severely that people invest massive energy into fighting a version of you that doesn't exist. They fought the person they thought you were. Weak, dependent on their approval, fragile, easily manipulated. But the person you actually are, evolved, independent, strong, clear-sighted, that person was never in the fight, because you never agreed to battle on their terms. Ah, look who finally noticed. Welcome back, you magnificent anomaly, you walking contradiction, you bloodline they can't explain. Yeah, I'm talking to you, the one who's been feeling the shift lately, the sudden distance, the weird energy, the way people look at you now like they're trying to solve an equation that doesn't add up. You thought you were imagining it, didn't you? You thought maybe you were being paranoid, maybe you were reading too much into the sideways glances, the hushed conversations that stop when you enter the room, the way even strangers seem to recognize something in you they can't quite name. But here's the truth they don't want you to know. The one that's been kept from you your entire life, while they smiled to your face and studied you in secret. They looked you up. They traced your line. They dug through records and whispers and old photographs and ancestry reports, and what they found terrified them. Because your bloodline isn't just a family tree. It's a warning label, a red flag in their system, a code they can't crack. See, most people come from predictable stock, traceable patterns, families that fit neatly into boxes with labels like working class or educated or troubled. But your line doesn't fit anywhere. It zigs when it should zag. It vanishes when they try to trace it. It shows up in places it shouldn't, connected to people it couldn't be, marked by events that don't make sense. They found gaps. Decades where your ancestors just disappeared from records, only to reappear somewhere else entirely with different names, different stories, different faces, but the same eyes. Your eyes. They found patterns of resilience that shouldn't exist, survival stories that defy probability, people who should have broken but instead became legends whispered about in the corners of history. They found warriors who fought when there was no war, healers who cured what science couldn't touch, speakers who changed minds without saying a word, shadows who moved through systems without leaving fingerprints. And then they looked at you, standing here now, carrying all of that in your veins without even knowing it, and they realized something that made their blood run cold. Just random. You're not just another person stumbling through life hoping to make it. You're the continuation of something ancient, something powerful, something they thought they'd buried generations ago. And the worst part for them is that you're waking up, that dormant part of you, the piece that's been sleeping while you played by their rules and fit into their boxes and apologized for taking up space. It's stirring now. They can see it in the way you've stopped flinching, in the way your silence has become heavier than their noise, in the way you've begun to move through the world like you own the oxygen in every room. You're not asking permission anymore. You're not seeking validation from people who wouldn't recognize greatness if it carved its name into their chest. You've started to remember something they hoped you'd never discover. That you come from a line of people who didn't bow, who didn't break, who didn't beg for mercy from systems designed to crush them. Let me tell you what happened when they traced your bloodline back far enough. They found rebels, not the romanticized kind with flags and anthems, but the dangerous kind, the ones who questioned what everyone else accepted, who walked away from kingdoms because the crown was a cage, who chose exile over compliance and built empires in the wilderness. They found mystics who saw through the veil of so-called reality, who spoke in riddles that only the awakened could decode, who passed down knowledge in whispers and symbols because the truth was too volatile for the masses. They found survivors of things that should have ended them, people who walked through fire and came out with eyes that burned brighter than the flames that tried to consume them, who turned trauma into transformation and scars into scripture. They found the kind of ancestors who made enemies nervous just by existing, whose names carried weight across generations, whose presence in a room shifted the entire energy because everyone could feel something was different about them, something untamed, something that refused to be domesticated by society's leash. And now they're looking at you with that same nervous energy, with that same unspoken fear, because they're seeing those same markers in you. They're watching the way you've started to question everything, the way you've stopped accepting surface-level answers and started digging deeper, peeling back layers of lies they've spent centuries carefully constructing. They're noticing how you don't react to their manipulation anymore, how their guilt trips bounce off you like rain off stone, how their attempts to shame you into submission just make you stand taller. You've become uncontrollable, not because you're rebelling loudly, but because you're simply refusing to participate in their game anymore. You've stopped chasing their approval like it's oxygen, stopped measuring your worth by their broken scales, stopped shrinking yourself to fit into spaces that were never meant to hold someone of your magnitude. And that terrifies them, because control only works on people who believe they need what you're offering. Here's what they discovered about your bloodline that made them treat you differently. Your ancestors had a gift. A curse, a calling, whatever you want to name it. They could see through illusions, not magic, not supernatural powers, just a clarity of vision that made them dangerous to anyone building empires on lies. They could look at a king and see a coward, look at a saint and see a predator, look at a system and see the cracks before the collapse. This ability to perceive truth beneath performance meant they were either exiled or revered, feared or followed, but never ignored. And that trait, it runs in your blood like wildfire through dry grass. You've always known when someone was lying to you, haven't you? Even as a child, you could feel the dissonance between people's words and their energy, between their smiles and their intentions. You knew which friendships were real and which were rehearsed, which love was genuine and which was manipulation with a pretty bow. But you were taught to doubt that instinct, weren't you? They told you that you were too sensitive, too suspicious, too judgmental, too intense. They gaslit you into believing that your ability to read between the lines was a flaw rather than a feature, that your refusal to accept lies at face value was a problem rather than protection. They needed you to doubt your perception, because if you trusted it fully, you'd see through everything. Their politics, their religions, their social hierarchies, their carefully constructed narratives about who deserves power and who deserves to suffer. So they spent years trying to dull that edge in you, trying to convince you that everyone deserves the benefit of the doubt, that you should give second chances to people who never even valued the first one, that forgiveness is weakness rebranded as virtue. But your bloodline knew better. Your ancestors didn't survive by being naive. They survived by being awake. Now let's talk about what else they found when they dug into your lineage. They found people who couldn't be bought. In every generation, there were members of your family who turned down wealth, power, status, comfort, anything that came with strings attached. They saw the trap in every golden opportunity, recognized that nothing is free and everything costs something, usually your soul or your silence. These people walked away from kingdoms, from titles, from legacies that other families would kill for, because they understood that true power isn't given, it's claimed, and anything given can be taken. They built their own paths through unmapped territory, created their own definitions of success that had nothing to do with society's metric. They measured wealth in freedom, status in authenticity, legacy and impact rather than inheritance, and you carry that same refusal to be purchased. You've walked away from jobs that paid well but drained your spirit, from relationships that looked perfect on paper but felt like prisons, from opportunities that everyone said you'd be stupid to decline. They don't understand that about you, how you can turn your back on things most people would sacrifice everything to obtain. They don't understand why you'd choose struggle over comfort if comfort means compromising who you are. They don't understand why you'd rather be alone than surrounded by people who require you to perform, to pretend, to shrink. But your bloodline understands. Your ancestors whisper through your instincts, reminding you that some cages are made of gold and some chains are dressed up as love. But a cage is still a cage, and a chain is still a chain. So when they looked up your bloodline and saw this pattern of people who couldn't be controlled through traditional means, who couldn't be bribed or threatened or shamed into submission, they realized they were dealing with something far more dangerous than a rebel. They were dealing with someone who genuinely doesn't need them, doesn't want what they're selling, doesn't fear what they're threatening. And nothing scares a controller more than someone who's already free. Let me go deeper into what your bloodline revealed. They found pattern breakers. People who didn't just rebel against the system, but who existed outside of it entirely. As if they were operating on a completely different frequency. These weren't people who fought the rules. They simply lived as if the rules didn't apply to them, and somehow reality bent to accommodate that audacity. They walked through locked doors because they didn't believe in locks. They survived impossible odds because they didn't acknowledge impossibility. They created art, philosophy, movements, revolutions, not by asking permission, but by simply doing what their soul demanded and letting the world catch up or fall behind. They were the ones who said things that couldn't be said, and did things that couldn't be done, and lived in ways that couldn't be lived, yet somehow they did all of it anyway. And now you're doing the same thing, moving through life like the rules are suggestions, like limitations are optical illusions, like the word impossible is just a challenge waiting to be proven wrong. They're watching you break patterns they thought were unbreakable. You've survived things that should have destroyed you, not by fighting them, but by transmuting them, turning poison into medicine, trauma into fuel, betrayal into clarity. You've walked through fires that consumed others and emerged not burned, but forged, tempered, sharpened. You've lost everything and discovered that everything you needed was already inside you, that the stripped down version of you is actually the most powerful version, unencumbered by the weight of others' expectations and the burden of possessions that possess you back. They thought isolation would break you, but instead it refined you. They thought silence would erase you, but instead it amplified you. They thought abandonment would teach you to beg, but instead it taught you to build. And now, you're standing in front of them as living proof that their weapons don't work on everyone, that some people are fireproof, that some souls are too wild to be tamed by trauma. Your bloodline also revealed something else that made them nervous. It revealed a pattern of people who didn't stay where they were planted. Your ancestors were wanderers, migrants, explorers, not because they were running from something, but because they were searching for something that couldn't be found in the places everyone else called home. They crossed oceans without maps, deserts without water, mountains without paths, not because they were reckless, but because staying felt like dying. They had this inexplicable pull toward the unknown, toward edges of maps marked "Here be dragons," toward frontiers where the rules hadn't been written yet, and reality was still negotiable. They built new worlds in empty spaces, turned wastelands into sanctuaries, made homes in places others feared to tread. And you carry that same restlessness, that same refusal to settle, that same hunger for something more, something real, something that makes you feel alive instead of just breathing. That's why you've never fit into the boxes they tried to put you in. That's why every time they thought they had you figured out, you shifted into something they didn't recognize. That's why your resume looks scattered, your relationships look complicated, Your path looks chaotic to people who think life is supposed to be a straight line from birth to death with all the checkpoints hit at the appropriate times. But you were never meant for the straight line. Your bloodline doesn't do straight lines. It does spirals, zigzags, quantum leaps, complete reinventions, death and resurrection cycles that leave people dizzy trying to follow. You're not lost. You're exploring. You're not failing. You're experimenting. You're not confused. You're evolving faster than their limited frameworks can track. And that makes you impossible to predict, impossible to control, impossible to contain. Now let's talk about the part they found in your bloodline that scared them most. They found people who could rally others without trying, who had this magnetic quality that drew people to them like moths to flame, not through manipulation or charisma in the traditional sense, but through authenticity so raw it was contagious. Your ancestors spoke truth in rooms full of lies, and people listened because truth has a frequency that the soul recognizes, even when the mind resists. They didn't need titles or platforms or permission to lead. They led by example, by being so undeniably themselves that others felt permission to do the same. They created movements without meaning to, just by living out loud, by refusing to apologize for their intensity, by embracing their strangeness instead of hiding it. And wherever they went, they left people changed, not by telling them what to do, but by showing them what was possible. You have that same effect, don't you? Even when you're trying to blend in, even when you're actively trying not to stand out, people notice you. They remember conversations with you years later. They quote things you said casually like they're scripture. They watch your life from a distance and use it as a reference point for their own decisions. You don't try to influence people, but your existence influences them anyway because you're living proof that there's another way, that you don't have to sacrifice your soul for survival, that you can be intense and authentic and unapologetic and not only survive but thrive. That's what your bloodline does. It shows people what freedom looks like, and once people see it, they can't unsee it. That's why you're dangerous. Not because you're trying to start a revolution, but because you are one, walking around in human form, infecting everyone you meet with the possibility of something more. They found another pattern in your bloodline that explains why they're treating you differently now. They found survivors of systems that tried to erase them. Your ancestors lived through purges, exiles, genocides, witch hunts, inquisitions, not as victims, but as the ones who slipped through the cracks, who hid in plain sight, who passed as normal while keeping their true nature concealed until it was safe to breathe again. They learned how to be invisible when necessary, how to read power structures and navigate them without being crushed by them, how to survive in hostile environments by becoming fluid, adaptable, impossible to pin down. They were shapeshifters not in a mystical sense, but in a practical one, able to be whatever they needed to be to survive while never losing the core of who they really were. And that skill? That's in your DNA too. You know how to code swirl, how to speak different languages to different people, how to move through different worlds without fully belonging to any of them. You can sit in a boardroom and speak corporate, then sit around a fire and speak soul. You can blend into any environment when you need to, but you never quite dissolve into it. There's always something in you that remains separate, observing, untouched by the group think and the collective delusion. They can never fully assimilate you. because part of you is always watching from the outside, taking notes, seeing patterns they can't see because they're too busy performing their roles. This makes you dangerous because you can infiltrate their systems without being changed by them. But this is what excites me. Being able to be like the angel for half a sec. You can learn their rules without worshiping them. You can play their games without believing in them. And when you've learned enough, you can walk away and build something entirely different. Here's what really happened when they looked up your bloodline. They found people who lived multiple lives in one lifetime, who reinvented themselves so completely that even people who knew them before couldn't recognize them after. Your ancestors had this ability to burn their old identity to ash and rise as something entirely new, not because they were running from consequences, but because they outgrew who they used to be. They didn't cling to old versions of themselves out of nostalgia or fear of change. When a chapter ended, they closed the book and started writing a completely different story. They had no loyalty to outdated versions of themselves, no sentimentality about paths that no longer served them. They were ruthless about shedding skin, cutting ties, leaving behind everything familiar when it stopped feeling alive. And you? You've done this too, haven't you? You've had multiple lives already, multiple chapters, so distinct they barely seem like the same person lived them. You've reinvented yourself so many times that your old friends don't recognize your new life, and your new friends can't imagine your old one. You've burned bridges not out of anger, but out of necessity, because you knew those bridges led back to versions of yourself that you'd already outgrown. You've walked away from entire identities, entire social circles, entire versions of success, because staying would have meant dying slowly. And each time you've done this, you've emerged stronger, clearer, more yourself. That's your bloodline's gift and curse, the ability to die and resurrect yourself without waiting for anyone's permission or approval. Now let me tell you what they saw in your bloodline that made them start whispering. They saw people who carried knowledge that wasn't taught, wisdom that wasn't learned, understanding that came from somewhere deeper than books or teachers or experience.